Football season's here, just about. College football season starts earlier and earlier every season. So we got week 1, no week 0 this year for UNLV. It's Steve Cofield. Caleb Herring is here. UNLV All Access Podcast. We'll be doing a lot of the same things we did last year, but trying to improve on it. Obviously, Broadcaster Bites comes up, our travel experiences with food around the Mountain West Conference and around the UNLV schedule. Caleb, you're looking good. I hope you had a good summer as we're back into it. And unlike last year, there might be some questions about what the expectations are, but there are absolutely expectations now with Rebel football.
No, it's a good spot to be in as a program. I think it's the right feeling to have in year 2 of rebuilding and trying to turn it into a football school, trying to become a notable collegiate program. And it's a good expectation, right? After what was to a lot of people a surprising finish to last year, right? Finishing the Mountain West Championship game, getting to a bowl game, getting that monkey off your back of not being to a bowl game in like 13 or so years, and getting that established. Now I think the expectations come with the reality that, oh, this might happen. And I think the fans are excited in that way, where it's like, hey, we might actually have a good team. There's a lot less skepticism around the build up to this year than there has been in years past. We've had new coaches, we've had optimism for the season, but it was always met with same old Rebels. I have not seen that or heard that as much this year from Rebel Nation. Definitely haven't heard it from within the program. The expectations, especially after last season, were basically to do more of the same and better, right? I think in a lot of ways, the finish to last year, the 3-game losing streak, losing the bowl game, losing the Mountain West Championship game, gave motivation for those who were a part of it to say, you know what, we didn't finish the job. It was good, but we didn't finish it. So it gives an instant goal for the offseason to kind of push things along. And that's where they are right now. They're driven to achieve where they failed last season. So I'm excited about it. And apparently the nation is excited about UNLV football and what they have going on, what they did last year. Barry Odom turned heads as a first-year coach, and to the tune now of 11 nationally televised games in one capacity or another. The Rebels schedule is basically full with TV games. Some games got moved to Fridays because of that desired media market that UNLV is enjoying. So now the lights are on and everybody's watching. Not going to sneak up on anybody this season. So hopefully the Rebels are ready for that challenge.
Yeah, I love how many times I've heard from coaches and players that last year, like, it almost sounds like it sucked. And that's not what they're saying, but that's their lasting memory. I saw Vance Weiss on Monday was like really strong on, like, we can't have what happened last year. Michael Scheer like really went off just talking about miscommunication and really bad play down the stretch and the deep ball. That is actually the fixing that, and the defensive back room is actually our second biggest story coming into the season for us, for Caleb, and maybe he's not objective, but no, he is on this one. Having a quarterback battle coming into camp can be a good thing, but it's not the most comfortable position to be in.
It's not preferred. Let's say that, right? It's not, you would like to come into a season knowing who the guy is, allowing all the reps and all the chemistry to be built through that person. I think that's ideal. And any coach would probably agree with that. But if you don't know, you don't know. And in the case of the Rebels this year, Jaden Mayava left in the transfer portal. They've got 2 new additions in Matt Sluka and Hajj-Malik Williams, who are new to the program, not new to football by any means, but new to the program. Got to figure out who's the best fit on the field. And with Coach Odom and what they have demonstrated in our short sample size, it is about the fit with this system, both offensively and defensively. And whoever fits best, they need to figure that out. And that's what fall camp is going to be for. So they will have a competition. It's already underway. They're about a week into camp now as we're recording this. And it's really still anybody's game at this point. I will say there's a psychological element to the quarterback battle where it can become a controversy. And I don't think you ever want it to become a controversy. As long as it's a competition, I think a competitive atmosphere is good in any position group, and quarterback's no exception to that. But there can be controversy with the quarterback position. And as long as that doesn't seep in, I think it's good. It's okay. This quarterback room in particular, this competition is very different than most that I've seen or been around, because everybody that's in it, it's a 3-horse race with Cam Friel, Hajj-Malik Williams, and Matt Sluka. All of them are seniors. And I think that's a unique angle that doesn't really dawn on people in that regard. Usually there's an underclassman in there somewhere, right? Like a junior or sophomore. But all three of these guys are mature enough to handle a competition. And in the case of Cam Friel, he's been in like 3 or 4 in his career at UNLV alone. So I think that helps keep it from becoming a controversy or a distraction. All three guys are mature enough to handle what they need to do on and off the field to keep the competition sportsmanlike, I guess, and for the good of the team. So I think it's going to be a healthy one. Listening to Coach Odom early in camp, I think he wants it to be settled earlier rather than later. And whichever direction that ends up going in, I think he's really honestly wants to leave it up to the players and evaluate what he sees on film and then make a decision. If somebody separates himself, I don't think he's going to be afraid to pull the trigger early. And that being said, I don't think he's going to be afraid to wait to the last minute. We've seen him do that as well. So it's going to be fun. And I think this system will look different regardless of who takes the helm in year 2. The go-go offense will look different with whoever starts week 1 at quarterback.
And week 1 doesn't end the story because we saw last year because of injuries, Jade Maeva came from out of nowhere and then was probably better than, this is an old argument, probably better than I think Brumfield would have been in the offense had he been healthy. But that was an adjustment on the fly and they did it smoothly and they went on to win a lot of games. And I mean, I think quarterback controversy could exist going into week 2 or even week 3. Unfortunately, the whole 2 quarterback system, and that question was asked the first day of practice, there really can't be a 2 quarterback system because of, I don't think there can, because of the scheduling, because you come right out of the gates with a game that you need to win. Right now, the odds makers basically have it as an even game. At Houston doesn't afford you, a warm-up game like you've had in years past.
Yeah, I don't think you can be in a situation where you're trying to figure it out on the fly. And there may have been some grace with that, with scheduling. If you're playing a FCS opponent or a lower division opponent in week 1, as sometimes happens. But this year, no, out of the gates, it's a tough opponent. Like it's not Michigan. It's not a historically great school like the Rebels have had in the past. But Houston is a serious program, right? Like they're one of the programs that if you could go back, 10 years or so, you could see UNLV being in Houston's situation where they're, a group of 5 school that's had some success, moved up in the rankings, now find themselves in a power 5 or power 4, whatever it is now, in the Big 12. And now they're an established program, right? They're in a town that has professional sports teams with, Houston being one of the biggest cities in the world. But they're blossoming now as a sports university or football university in Houston. And that's where they find themselves. So looking 10 years in the future, UNLV, maybe in a little quicker than 10 years, would hope to be in a similar spot as where Houston is. Now, they're with a new coach and all that stuff, but that doesn't change the fact that they're a tough opponent. And they have recruited at a high level. That program has changed from what it used to be 10 years ago. So having a quarterback controversy in week 1 won't help things at all. And we know how important it is to get off to a fast start in the season, especially with the way the rest of the schedule shapes up. Losing those non-conference games puts a bind on your postseason hopes if you're UNLV. And that's the mindset that they're in now. So I think the quarterback competition needs to be settled before then. If there's any reason to say you need 2 quarterbacks, I would say probably because of the injury bug. I don't know the number off the top of my head, and I would have to get with Mark Wallington, SID, to get the actual number. But the number of seasons it's been since UNLV has had a quarterback start the year and finish the year, I think that streak is still going. Because last year counts. Doug started the year. He didn't finish the year. And before that, there'd been injuries or what have you, where the starting quarterback week to week was questionable. So I think you can prepare reasonably for the fact that you might need a second quarterback at some point during the season.
Do you think it's too early for anyone to be saying there is a QB1? I think it's too early. I haven't been at all the practices, so I don't know if anyone's separated so far. I don't think right now they have a QB1 decided.
No, I think it's too early. I agree with that. I think you could say, based on the early practices, who had a slight edge in the competition. But it was so apparent that Hajj had an edge because he's been there. He had the playbook in the spring. He was probably, I think, geared. His skill set fits the offense a little better right now than Cam Friel's does, and he's had the playbook longer than Matt Sluka does. So I think it was pretty clear in the early practices that he had the edge, but not enough to say he's the guy. Like I wouldn't say anybody who thinks they know that for sure, outside of the coaches, maybe they know, but anybody who says for sure that it's a done deal, I don't think understands that the gap between these two guys is not very, very significant. So it's going to take, and more importantly, I think a part of evaluating quarterbacks is consistency. And if you have too small a sample size, you can't establish who's been consistent or not. It's okay, 2 practices and he's the guy. Well, practice 3, 4, 5, and 6, then he comes out and wets the bed. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you're not the same guy you were at your best. Now I'm seeing you at your worst, and it's turnover city out there. So you want to give a large sample size with the quarterback reps, because then you can evaluate. And then I think a part of the way that the Rebels run practice too, there's a lot of mixing of the depth chart that happens in each practice. So one day, and this is just to say people that we know are starters, one day Ricky and Jacob De Jesus will be running in the same lineup of receivers, right? That'll be one day of practice. The next day, Ricky and Jacob will never be lined up together in the same unit. Depth chart wise, we're pretty sure that they're going to be starters, but they are not now in the same lineup. So a quarterback now gets exposed to what it's like to now not have Ricky when you're thrown out there, or what it's like to not have Jacob De Jesus. It's not a set in stone 1s and 2s. The longer you rotate through practice, the more opportunities you get to see your quarterback when he doesn't have all the top guys out there. How is it really him that's making these plays, or is it the fact that Ricky's on the field that makes him look better? That gets weeded out at the way that they practice, the way they 2-spot practice. So based on that, I don't think you could make any clear distinction on who the starting quarterback is, a week into fall camp.
I'm going to say something that seems really obvious, but I've heard it repeatedly early on from Odom and the quarterbacks. Without being asked directly, they all mentioned taking care of the ball. Now, that sounds obvious. Keep in mind, UNLV last year really turned things around with the turnover margin. They were 12th in the country with in turnover margin per game. On the positive side, they were a plus team. And now I think they're going to work the edge a lot more with the quarterback. So I don't know who's going to take care of the ball better. There's a lot more decisions that I think to be made this time around, because while Maava could tuck it a year ago, these guys, there's going to be design plays where maybe tucking it is the first move or pitching it is the first move. Taking care of the ball with so much to decide in a split second is going to be vital.
Yeah, there's a lot of, for all the trickery and the misdirection that we saw last year with the go-go and the possibilities on offense, that comes with decision making, with ball handling, not just throwing the ball, but like exchanges, like pitch man, option guy, handoff, shovel pass, whatever the case may be that they're asked to do in this brilliant but complicated offense. That comes down to mechanics and taking care of the football. Obviously, with a quarterback position, interceptions is what you immediately think of, like not turning the ball over in that regard. And we saw the turnover bug kind of crept in at the end with Jay Maava down the stretch. And you could say that it impacted the wins and losses down the stretch. And they want to avoid that. They absolutely want to possess the football. The turnover margin is one of the biggest indicators in analytics of winning football games. If you can win the turnover margin, you'll win more often than not. And that was the case last year for UNLV. But quarterbacking in that position specifically, it comes not just to interceptions, and not even in this case to being a ball carrier, not fumbling, but you start looking at completing passes when they are given to you to complete. Your completion percentage, your touchdown interception ratio. How many times are you putting in the end zone when you throw versus turn it over? We talk about third down conversion rate, decision making with the run game, because I think a heavy part of this offense is the quarterback making the right reads on RPOs or checks at the line of scrimmage to get the team in the best play. I think those things, in a sub context kind of way, are also included when you talk about taking care of the ball, because that's valuing possessions, right? Like, what am I doing on 3rd and 7? If there's an open lane, they're playing 2-man, right? And all my guys are covered downfield. Am I forcing that throw and it comes up incomplete? Yeah, it lands harmlessly to the ground. But could I have used my legs there? Could I have run for the chains and preserve that possession? And in that way, taking care of the ball? That's one of those things that I think the decision making of these quarterbacks is going to be put to the test. And whoever can manage those situations that are really hidden stats, but are considered taking care of the ball with an advanced look at it, I think that will separate them as well.
I got to tell you, I love the mindset, and I'm a little bit blown away by it, but I shouldn't be. But I've been so trained over the years that, well, you know what? Good, solid, UNLV football. But this coaching staff doesn't think that way. And this leads us into the second biggest story. And I won't even go to the position first here. Like even Vance Vice the other day on Monday, quote, I don't want to think about last year. It's got to bother you a little bit. So the run game wasn't as productive the last 3 games. Protection wasn't as good as it was those last 3 games. Prior protection was better. But the second biggest story in terms of frustration across the board from Odom onto the defensive side of things, and I don't know if that's one of the reasons they made change at the safety coach, right? They've got a switch with Nico Fertitta in. They got real leaky last year, and there were signs of it during the year. But they got real leaky at the end. Deep shots were a real problem. I'm down on the sidelines, and I kind of try not to freak out over different situations because I'm watching to see if they're freaking out. But clearly they walked away from the season and they were like, that was not good enough from our defensive backs room. And some of it was execution and communication. Let's start there. Let's start there before we get to, I think, what your biggest point is in terms of redoing the room. Execution and communication. What were the problems?
Well, I think as the season goes on with defenses, the schemes start to evolve. Right. You can't do your base stuff because now there's a lot of film out there. The tendencies that you had, you try to break some of them. You try to maybe even gamble with coverages and what you're doing as far as blitz packages and stuff like that on the front end. And I think to give the opponents down the stretch their fair shake here, those were 3 tough teams that the Rebels lost to, right? San Jose State last year, Boise State, and Kansas. Those teams that kind of exploited the secondary were good teams, and they were, good quarterbacks, very explosive offenses. So not to take credit from them, but there was a lot of self-inflicted wounds that came on the communication end where maybe the advancement in the packages, the Rebels defense didn't just keep pace with that and communicating new calls, new looks, versus maybe some creative looks from the other teams. The communication didn't get down the line quick enough, and that led to some explosive plays all throughout the end of last season. And I think, honestly, the Rebels showed tendencies to take risk defensively, and it paid off most of the time throughout the season. They were at the top of the conference as far as creating turnovers defensively, and that doesn't happen on accident, right? You have to be kind of forcing the issue. And I think when you gambled at the end of the year, maybe if there's any gap in the communication, then there's room to be exploited on the back end. A lot of guys were left in situations where if you're not the guy making the play, it's a big one. And unfortunately, they were out of position or just couldn't make the play when their numbers were called. So that may have something to do with just the expansion of the playbook and the nature of trying to be a defense that creates instead of sits on their heels and waits for the offense to come at them. And I do think that the depth at the position, there's a lot of this that was like extended drives or extended time on the field. Then the Rebels defense would suffer. And you look at that as kind of the complementary football element where if you mirror when these explosive plays happen against the Rebels defense, you could almost guess and almost be certain that during that time in the game, whatever point there was, the offense was also struggling. Quicker possessions offensively, 3 and outs, not holding on to possession, turnovers by your own offense that had you in a position where the other team is looking for explosive plays. So there's a lot that can go into it, but the communication was definitely an issue. And there was lineup changes. I mean, to be fair, there was guys that were injured last season that came back toward the end of the season. And not to say that those guys weren't good enough to play. I know Jonathan Baldwin was hurt for a big chunk of the season. He came back later in the year. So those kind of things, adding guys to the lineup just affects the communication on the back end. And Jarrett Williams even was a guy in the secondary who's kind of a tweener secondary nickel guy. But just the communication between everybody in the defensive backfield, I think, was a little bit off toward the end of the year. And those are some of the reasons. The expansion of the playbook, guys being added in and out of the rotation, and then just the fatigue and the situations in games that your defense was kind of left out to dry at times because of the complementary nature of football.
Then there's another thing. And you pointed this out, that sometimes the Jimmies and Joes, you can't keep up. And while in one offseason, Barry Odom and his defensive guys, his coaches, retool the defense a lot. There simply was a speed deficiency. You saw times where the other team was like, you can't keep up. We're just going to run by you.
Yeah. And that was apparent in the Kansas game and the bowl game. There were some times where it was like, Jackson Turner was a big time playmaker. And I think he ended the season. I don't want to quote myself on this, but I believe he had the highest usage of any defensive player. He was up there as far as the reps he was out on the field defensively, towards the top of the list. And towards the end of the year, he was kind of burnt out. And there was times where Kansas was attacking the matchup. Like if he's one-on-one chasing somebody, our fast guy is going to run away from him in the slot. And it was like, he's in position. He knows where to be. He's not lost. He just couldn't keep up at times. And there was a couple of different instances where that happened. And you feel for him, but that's just the team speed in the secondary wasn't quite where you would want it to be from my eye looking at it. And it's not to say that he was slow. That's not the case. But if you had a speedster to match up in the slot against him, you tended to lean on that advantage down the stretch. So I think that was an issue. And we know a lot of guys on defense, especially, played a high rep count during games. There wasn't a deep rotation, especially in the secondary. And then when you consider this scheme and the way that they're demanding these guys to cover a lot of field, like if you're playing safety, you're not just sitting back in the deep third, right? There's a play you're sitting back in the deep third. There's a play you're chasing somebody across the field man to man. And then there's a play where you're involved in setting the edge in the run game, right? So there's a lot on the field that you're being asked to do. So not having a guy to give you a blow for a series comes back to haunt you later down the stretch in the season. And to that, credit to Coach Fisher, strength coach, because there's a lot of guys that made it the whole season, the marathon of the season, without serious injury. And with all those reps that they tallied, it's kind of crazy when you look back and think about it, that it didn't affect people the way that, you would have anticipated it. But this year, I think the depth has been addressed. I think the speed in the secondary also, the ranginess of the guys in the secondary has been addressed with some of the new additions through the transfer portal. It's assumed based on the year and the fit and looking at them on paper that these guys will make an instant impact, like just about every other transfer that Coach Odom has brought in to this point. So I think most of the issues I think have been addressed. The depth and I think the speed in the secondary have all been addressed in this offseason.
They got some thumpers at safety. At defensive back, they've added a bunch of dudes. Obviously, Tony Grimes was the biggest get, a Michigan State commit who had played high level at North Carolina before that. Baldwin, Catalan are some of the thumpers. Malik Chavis is a guy on the outside. Cam Oliver is back. We'll see where Vessel blends in. I think Jed Elad's going to be another one of the thumpers. We'll see what they get out of former Missouri and Central Florida player Jarvis Ware. They've got some freshmen in who could log time at cornerback. So the crazy thing is it sounds like they have a ton of bodies, and then, as you said, wear and tear, and bodies can get reduced. So I think the third biggest story, and you have a different biggest story, I think the third biggest story of the fall camp is the kicker. Now, I think Chittenden, and believe it or not, he's in a really good race right now with veteran Andre Miona, who, if you remember last year, he was going to be the long-distance kicker before Pisano showed that he was just outstanding and could make, kicks in the low 50s. I think one of them will turn out, or the combo will turn out to be pretty good. But, man, what UNLV has had over the years at kicker has been simply incredible. I was just doing the numbers. Going back 4 years, and this will include – actually going back 5 years. This includes a very inactive year during COVID where Gutierrez only got 6 kicks off, made 5. They've made 76 of 86 field goals. That is 88%. Ridiculous. They haven't missed an extra point in 3+ seasons. I mean, going back, they are 114 of 114 the last 3 years. Like, that was very much taken for granted, and it won close games a year ago. So you have to say, without knowing that both of these guys, or one of them will emerge as a freaking lock, that it is a big question going into the season.
No, it is. It is a huge question. I think when you have an All-American kicker leave and walk out of your door, when special teams was such a big part of the team's success last year, that was one of the biggest storylines. Who knew going into the season, the special team success? And obviously the return game had a part of that as well. Marshall Nichols, who is back, was stellar, and he's actually in the running for some preseason watch list recognition as well this year. So I think the Ray Guy Award he's up for, or at least on the watch list for. But the place kicker, the field goal kicking that specifically helped UNLV win a lot of games. There was games where, if not for field goals, it might have been over. And keeping field goals on the table, and you're talking 30 yards, 40 yards, just being able to knock those in consistently. What was the record? I think the record was set by Pisano last year for most field goals kicked in a single game by a Rebel kicker. And I could be wrong with that. Again, I'll consult Mark Wallington. He'll correct me when he hears this. But I believe it was 5 or 6 field goals that he made in a tight game that ended up being the difference and keeping the Rebels in, within contact and able to make a move at the end. So it had a game winner as well. So there's all kinds of storylines that could come to play. Mayono, though, had a good camp. Like we remember watching him, and there was a little bit of a battle. And James Shebest had talked about how he was trying to get, the speed of his kickers, the height off the tee, and all that stuff to improve. But there was a range gap where it seemed like, just watching, Mayono had the stronger leg. If you just looked at like the distance and the height that the ball traveled. But like you said, the accuracy that was there, it was like money in the bank when Pisano lined up. So it's like, you go with a more accurate guy, right? Especially when your offense is getting you in close range. But it's going to be interesting to see. And then not just for field goal kicking, but for getting the ball for touchbacks. I know that's the thing for, a lot of special team guys. If it's the easiest thing to do is to put it in the end zone. I don't know that that's always going to be the case for UNLV. I think there's times where they trust their coverage team. They want to try to pin guys inside the 25 and kind of chip it in and put some air under it, let the coverage team get down and kind of dare returners to try it and bring it out. But we'll see how that goes. I think special teams was a big story of last season, and it's going to be this year because you're replacing one of the best place kickers in UNLV history.
Jose Pisano's records include program record for most field goals in a game with 6, most in a season with 25, total points in a game with 19, and total points in a season with 127. Your third biggest question or biggest story of UNLV's fall camp surprises me a little bit. But maybe I'm just making the assumption that it's going to work no matter who is the personnel. But you think it is what position?
I think it's the running back room. I think they lose some guys that were workhorses in that room. I think they lose depth for sure. Well, I shouldn't say lose because they replaced the guys that left. I'm talking about Vincent Davis and Donovan Lester obviously came over as seniors. They're done at UNLV, but they were obviously contributors. Vincent Davis started the season off with one of the best runs, one of the most electrifying runs of the season. It was a steady force in the ground game. I think Jayden Thomas is a suitable number 1 option, right? He was on his way to being freshman of the year, had his quarterback not kind of stolen the shine offensively in that regard. But Jet started off the season and really was a force all year as far as getting the ball in the end zone as a freshman running back. But now there's a new stable of guys, and there's some familiar guys to Las Vegas with Greg Burrell. And they're taking the year off of the guy. He makes his way into the running back room. Michael Allen, some transfers in as well to replace and refill what they lost, but we just haven't seen it yet. And because how potent the ground game was, and because these running backs, not just on getting the ball in the end zone, but converting on third downs with their legs. There's a lot of times UNLV handed the ball off on third and medium and got first downs. They relied a lot on this ground game. So I want to see how that room replaces and how they divvy up the workload, because I just haven't seen. They don't have a guy, first of all, nearly as big as Donovan Lester. I think Donovan Lester was massive compared to the running back stable they have now. There's some guys that are close, but he was massive, and he had deceptive speed as well. So I don't know that, Jayden has put on some weight. I don't know that you want to give him, 70% of the carries out of the backfield. I think you want to keep it a steady dose of everybody and kind of keep the misdirection alive. So do they have somebody that can trust to split the reps like they did with Vincent Davis, who became a workhorse, and like Donovan Lester? Because there was times in the games last year where you started off the first half and it was all Courtney Reese, all Jayden Thomas. Then in the second half, third and fourth quarter, all of a sudden it's all Vincent Davis, all Donovan Lester to finish things off. And there were several times during the season where we're like, the running backs have fresh legs because it's a stable. There's a new running back there. It's just a question if they'll be able to do that same thing, or does it become more of a Jayden Thomas show because he's the more trusted running back in the backfield. So the other ones just have to prove it, and I've yet to see it. As fall camp goes and maybe they get some more live action, some actual full to the ground tackling, and we kind of separate who's going to be able to do it in game or not. Maybe that question gets answered a little, and maybe behind the offensive line, which is returning a lot of key pieces on the offensive line, maybe it doesn't matter who's at running back. But that's one of those things that over the offseason, if I could pick a room that I thought would have to worry about, the receiver room is probably locked. The tight end room is good. The offensive line is good. I would say the running back room, along with the quarterbacks, are the biggest question mark for the Go-Go next year.
Lots of questions to be answered. And many more will come, and it's I think a very upgraded schedule. I think there's a storyline with 9/10 head coaches new to that program. Nehemiah Tololo isn't new as a head coach, but he was at Navy. He's going to run a completely different style with a San Jose State team that actually lost a lot of guys. Some had followed Brent Brennan to Arizona. So the schedule is fascinating, and it's something we'll get into in the coming weeks. We do 2 podcasts every week, UNLV All Access, and then Broadcaster Bites. Before we get to a quick Broadcaster Bites hit, I want to mention a couple of things. Season tickets are available. They are humming along. They're setting records. I know they're a short number away from reaching another level that they really want to reach. Packages start as low as $150. Club area season tickets are $350, which is really affordable and a great setup at Allegiant. So check them out. Check them out. You want to be part of this, and it's a really good home schedule that includes Boise here. The Cannon game against Reno is here. Syracuse is in town. Fresno, another big boy in the conference, is in town. It's UNLVtickets.com, UNLVtickets.com. All right, Broadcaster Bites. We talk about food throughout the football season, in town and out of town. The road games include, I'll go from the end of the season to the beginning, at San Jose, at Hawaii, in Corvallis, at Oregon State, in Logan, at Utah State, at Kansas, at Houston. Most important, and it could be the most impressive road trip food-wise. What are you looking forward to the most?
It's tough because Texas has never done me wrong when it comes to food. So Houston out of the gates is exciting. I think for the fact that we will have the longest amount of time to do our research and to be properly prepared and equipped for the trip. So there should be no excuse for us to make that a good one. I'll say Kansas is intriguing because it's the only place that I've never been, like as far as the region in the country.
Oh wow.
I've never been there. So I don't really know what to expect. Barbecue I hear is good in the region. So
wow. The way you kind of limped into that, you're gonna really piss off KC people.
And I maybe think somebody steps up.
I think one of the things we have to do is a Texas, Kansas City barbecue showdown. I think we've got to pit some brisket in Texas, maybe more beef against the traditional, pork, ribs, burnt ends of Kansas City. I have a bunch of Kansas City places I've been to. There's a couple I haven't been to that I want to go to. But I think we owe that to the audience. That could be exciting.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely room there for a rivalry to start budding. Maybe we'll be the deciding factor. We'll stir the pot a little bit. Try to get people a little pissed off. I think it's like a Whataburger In-N-Out discussion to be had there. But I've heard nothing but great things about it, and so that might be, if my preseason rankings were to be released this week, I would say Kansas might be my number one I'm most excited about. And we'll see if Houston can pull through and steal that in week 1. But Hawaii is always fantastic food. I think rumor has it we're going to be headed up. The team's going to be headed up a little early. So for us, that just means more food because we're fatties and we like to eat. So I will not complain about that.
If there's a wild card in there, so I just got back from a trip to the Bay Area. Don't laugh. I don't think I got the exact fill of Oakland like I wanted to. I may be looking for the best chicken or / chicken and waffles in Oakland. So we're going to do some research on that because We're actually not staying in San Jose proper. It's a big secret. We can't divulge the information. But another complicating factor is how many places do we want to hit that have karaoke?
We're karaokeers. I don't know if that's how you say it, but we do the karaoke. I don't know if we want to put some sort of cautionary tale next to these karaoke spots and make sure that we are finding actual just karaoke spots. But I'm always up for karaoke, for a good time, for some fun. And then, with Matt, with his first year with the crew, officially, I think we've got to initiate him the right way. And what better way to initiate, as we saw in Hard Knocks, than forced karaoke participation?
Yes. I've been to karaoke places, and I stumbled on all of these. I didn't know about them. Just happened to walk in Houston, in San Jose, for sure. I found a great one, and of course, we are going to one in Hawaii because you guys busted your cherry big time the last time we went to Hawaii. So we will find another Korean karaoke joint to explore. So it's a very exciting season for Broadcaster Bites. I know we seem more jazzed up now than we were for the 28 minutes we did on UNLV football. We're equally as jazzed up or more about the football than we are about the Bites. So trust me.
Yeah, it's going to be a great season. We have so much to live up to. And, there's been some seasons where we fall off and we don't follow through with our research. We get criticism throughout. It turns out to be, people start to compete with us and try to compare their dining destinations with ours. And we're having none of it. If you want the best in all of these towns, you follow Broadcaster Bites. The wing challenge to dethrone Reno as the best wing spot that we have traveled to, that's still ongoing. And I think if nothing else, that's what I'm relying on Houston for. I have faith that Houston will have some wings that will knock them off. So we could get that early victory as well. But Broadcaster Bites is your exclusive home of the UNLV Learfield broadcast team's foodie exploits on the road. We've got rules. And if you listen, you know the rules, right? Like, you don't dine at chain restaurants, do your research, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's things we know and that you've learned with us. If it's on diners, what is it? Drive-ins, diners, and that. I always mess up the title. You know what I'm talking about. It's on Triple D, if it's on Triple D, we go. That's something I learned the hard way. I made the mistake of talking it down. If it's on Triple D and it's in a city near us, we're going. So I'm sure we can scour Triple D and find somewhere in Houston that he's been that will check all the boxes.
A reminder, Barry Odom Radio Show is back at Parkway Tavern, 2:15 and Flamingo. First show. They're all at 6 o'clock. Will be August 28th. That is a Wednesday. They're all on Wednesdays, but Parkway Tavern, Flamingo, and 2:15. And get your season tickets, UNLVtickets.com. Caleb, great job. The opener. We're back next week with another edition of UNLV All Access Podcast.